present moment is where all transformation begins. Too often we seek change outside of ourselves, chasing achievements, possessions, or approval, believing that fulfillment lies somewhere in the future. But true growth does not come from adding more. It comes from awakening to what is already within you. This year, let go of the illusion that you must become someone else to be worthy. Growth is not a struggle, but a natural unfolding, like a tree reaching for the sky. When you release resistance to what is, you create space for what can be. Do not allow the mind's chatter to trap you in fear, doubt, or comparison. The past is gone, the future is not yet here, there is only now, and now is enough. See each challenge not as an obstacle, but as an invitation to deepen your awareness. When frustration arises, observe it. When impatience appears, watch it. Do not become entangled in your emotions, instead witness them with stillness, knowing they are temporary. Growth happens in the silence between thoughts, in the moments when you stop reacting and start being. The present moment is the only space where life truly happens. Yet the mind constantly pulls us away, either into the past with memories and regrets, or into the future with worries and expectations. It tells us that fulfillment, success, or peace lies somewhere else, just out of reach. This illusion keeps us trapped in an endless cycle of seeking, never realizing that everything we need is already here. To embrace the present means to step out of this illusion and into reality as it is, free from mental projections. When you fully engage with the present, you begin to notice how much of your suffering is created by resistance. The mind labels situations as good or bad, desirable or undesirable, based on past conditioning. But life itself is neutral. It is only the mind's interpretation that causes distress. A simple moment of silence, a breath, or the feeling of the wind against your skin carries no burden until the mind intervenes, adding a story to it. The practice of embracing the present begins with observing this mental interference and realizing that you are not your thoughts. There is a deeper awareness within you that simply watches, unaffected. By becoming aware of the mind's tendency to pull you away from the now, you start to see how much energy is wasted on things that do not exist in this moment. Regretting something from the past does not change it. Worrying about the future does not prevent it. The only thing that ever exists is this moment, and within it there is always peace. Even in the midst of chaos, there is a space of stillness that remains untouched. When you bring your attention to this stillness, you free yourself from the burden of time. Every experience, no matter how small, becomes rich when you are fully present for it. The simple act of drinking a glass of water, feeling its coolness as it touches your lips, and sensing it flow down your throat becomes an experience of depth when approached with full awareness. In contrast, when the mind is lost in thought, even the most extraordinary moments pass by unnoticed. Life is not lacking. It is our presence that is absent. By returning to the now, we return to life itself. Presence does not mean ignoring responsibilities or disregarding future plans. It means approaching them with full awareness rather than being consumed by them. When action arises from a place of presence, it is effective, clear, and unburdened by unnecessary worry. Decisions are no longer made out of fear or urgency, but from a deeper sense of knowing. The struggle disappears, replaced by an effortless flow. This is not passivity, it is the highest form of intelligence, responding to life with clarity instead of reacting out of habit. The more you practice staying in the present, the more natural it becomes. Moments of stillness expand, and the mind's constant chatter begins to lose its grip. This does not mean thoughts stop completely, but they lose their power over you. Instead of being lost in them, you see them as passing clouds in the sky, there but not defining you. A deeper sense of self emerges, one that is not based on past experiences or future aspirations, but on the simple awareness of being. Life unfolds in this moment. Every breath, every sensation, every sound is a reminder that you are here, alive, and complete. There is no need to search outside yourself for meaning or fulfillment. It is already here in the quiet simplicity of now. Resistance is the force that keeps us stuck, preventing growth, clarity, and inner peace. It manifests in many forms: fear, doubt, hesitation, frustration, whispering that things should be different from how they are. The mind, conditioned by past experiences and future anxieties, clings to a version of reality that does not exist, creating conflict between what is and what it believes should be. This inner resistance drains energy, leading to stress, exhaustion, and an ongoing sense of dissatisfaction. Yet, life continues to unfold as it always does, indifferent to the mind's protests. The moment resistance arises, tension follows. The body tightens, the breath becomes shallow, and thoughts race in endless loops. There is a push against the present, an attempt to alter it through force or denial. But resistance does not change reality, it only deepens suffering. When something unwanted happens, the mind immediately labels it as bad, as a mistake, as something to fight against. This reaction is automatic, deeply ingrained, and unconscious. Yet, the experience itself is neutral. It is not the event but the mental story attached to it that causes distress. The more resistance builds, the stronger the illusion becomes, keeping life feeling like a constant battle rather than a natural flow. Letting go of resistance does not mean giving up or becoming passive. It means allowing what is to be as it is without adding unnecessary struggle. It is the difference between standing in a river and flowing with the current versus fighting against it. The river moves regardless of resistance, but the experience changes based on how one responds. The effort to control what cannot be controlled leads only to exhaustion. Surrendering to what is does not mean weakness. It is an act of profound strength. It means stepping out of the mental habit of rejection and into a state of acceptance, where clarity and action arise naturally rather than from force. Fear is one of the most persistent forms of resistance. The mind creates endless scenarios, projecting worries and doubts into the future, convincing itself that control is necessary to prevent disaster. Yet, the future exists only as thought. In this moment there is no danger, only the mind's interpretation of what might come. The fear of failure, rejection, or uncertainty holds people back not because these things are real, but because resistance magnifies them, making them seem more significant than they are. By releasing the need to control the unknown, fear loses its grip, and life is allowed to unfold as it will without unnecessary interference. Another form of resistance is attachment, holding on to ideas, beliefs, or identities that no longer serve growth. The mind fears change, cling to familiarity even when it causes suffering. It prefers the known over the unknown. Even if the known is limiting, letting go of these attachments feels unsettling because the mind equates them with safety. But safety is an illusion. True security comes not from holding on to fixed identities, but from the ability to adapt, flow, and embrace the ever-changing nature of existence. The tighter the grip, the more painful the experience. The moment resistance is released, freedom follows. When resistance fades, life becomes effortless. Situations that once caused frustration are met with ease. Challenges arise, but they are no longer seen as obstacles. Only experiences unfold. There is no longer a constant need to fix, change, or control everything. What was once a struggle becomes a dance, where movement happens naturally, without strain. The energy that was once wasted on resistance is now available for creation, connection, and deep presence. What once felt heavy becomes light, and what once seemed like conflict turns into harmony. The mind is constantly reacting. Every situation, every word, every passing thought triggers an internal response: approval, disapproval, frustration, excitement, fear. This reactivity is so deeply ingrained that it seems automatic, as if there is no separation between an event and the emotional response it provokes. But there is a space in between. In that space lies the power to observe rather than react, to step out of conditioned patterns and into a state of awareness that is not bound by emotions or thoughts. When a negative emotion arises, it feels immediate and overwhelming, as if it defines reality itself. Someone says something critical, and suddenly irritation flares up. An unexpected situation occurs and frustration takes over. The mind jumps into action, constructing a narrative around what happened, why it was wrong, and what should have been different. It builds arguments, defends itself, blames others, and reinforces the cycle of suffering. Yet beneath all of this, there is something else: awareness. A still, silent presence that simply notices what is happening without becoming lost in it. Observing does not mean suppressing emotions or pretending they do not exist. It means creating distance, allowing feelings to arise without immediately reacting to them. When anger appears, instead of being consumed by it, there is the ability to step back and watch. The body tightens, the breath shortens, thoughts race, but none of this has to be acted upon. By simply witnessing the process, the emotion loses its intensity. It is seen for what it is: temporary, fleeting, a passing movement rather than an absolute truth. This ability to observe extends beyond emotions to thoughts themselves. The mind is constantly generating opinions, judgments, and interpretations, many of which are habitual and unconscious. It labels people and situations, categorizes experiences as good or bad, desirable or undesirable. Yet none of these thoughts are reality itself. They are only interpretations, shaped by past conditioning. When a thought arises, it can be observed rather than believed. Instead of immediately identifying with it, there is a choice to engage with it or to let it pass. The more this practice is developed, the less control the mind has. In conversations, reactions often happen before there is even time to reflect. Someone says something, and an automatic response emerges. Defensiveness, agreement, disagreement, irritation. But between the words spoken and the reaction given, there is a space. In that space, there is the opportunity to pause, to observe the reaction forming, and to choose whether to act on it. Instead of responding with impulse, there can be stillness, a moment of clarity that allows for a response rather than a reaction. This shift transforms relationships, making interactions more conscious and free from unnecessary conflict. The practice of observing instead of reacting does not mean becoming detached or indifferent. It means engaging with life more fully, without being ruled by unconscious impulses. When an experience is met with observation rather than resistance, it is understood more deeply. Instead of avoiding discomfort, there is a willingness to face it without being consumed by it. Instead of getting caught in endless cycles of thought, there is an ability to step back and watch the mind without being controlled by it. Every moment offers a choice: to react out of habit or to observe with awareness. The more often observation is chosen, the more peaceful life becomes. There is less inner turmoil, less unnecessary suffering, less entanglement in emotions and thoughts that arise only to pass away again. The mind may continue to generate reactions, but they no longer define reality. Instead, they are simply noticed and allowed to be without attachment, without identification. What remains is clarity, presence, and a deep sense of freedom. Stillness is not the absence of movement, but the presence of awareness. In a world filled with noise, urgency, and distraction, the mind is constantly engaged, thinking, planning, analyzing, worrying. It jumps from one thought to the next, never resting, never satisfied. This restless activity creates a sense of disconnection, making life feel rushed and overwhelming. Yet beneath the surface of all this mental noise, there is something deeper, a stillness that has always been there, untouched by the chaos of thought. This stillness is not something that needs to be created, it is something that needs to be noticed. It exists in the space between thoughts, in the silence between words, in the pauses between breaths. It is the background of every experience, the awareness that observes without judgment, without attachment. But the mind, conditioned by years of habitual thinking, resists stillness. It fears the absence of activity, equating silence with emptiness. It seeks constant stimulation, filling every moment with noise, distraction, or analysis. This is why stillness often feels unfamiliar at first, as if something is missing, but nothing is missing. In stillness, everything is present. When attention shifts from thoughts to stillness, a profound shift happens. The mind, accustomed to seeking answers externally, begins to recognize that clarity arises not from thinking more, but from thinking less. In silence, insight emerges naturally. Solutions appear without force. direction becomes clear without effort. The answers that seemed distant and unreachable were never outside. They were always waiting in the space beyond thought. But accessing this clarity requires trust. Trust that stillness is not empty but full. Stillness does not mean inactivity. It does not mean withdrawing from life or avoiding responsibility. It means moving from a place of inner presence rather than mental noise. When actions arise from stillness, they are more effective, more precise, more aligned with what is needed. There's no wasted energy, no unnecessary struggle. Everything flows with a sense of ease because it is no longer driven by compulsive thinking. The urgency to act for the sake of acting fades, replaced by a deep sense of knowing when to move and when to wait. The body reflects the state of the mind. When the mind is restless, the body is tense. The breath is shallow, movements are rushed, and there's a constant feeling of being behind, as if time is running out. But when stillness is embraced, the body responds. The breath deepens, the muscles relax, the nervous system settles. There is no longer a sense of being pushed forward by time, but a sense of being exactly where life is unfolding. Presence replaces anxiety, and in that presence, even the simplest moments become meaningful. To cultivate stillness, it is not necessary to escape from the world. It is not necessary to sit in silence for hours or seek solitude in remote places. Stillness exists even in the busiest moments of life. It can be found in the pauses between words during a conversation, in the brief moment of awareness before taking a step, in the quiet attention given to a single breath. The key is not to create stillness, but to notice it. The more it is noticed, the more it expands, becoming the foundation from which life is experienced. From this space, emotions lose their intensity, thoughts lose their power to create suffering. What once seemed overwhelming now appears manageable. What once felt chaotic now feels harmonious. The external world remains the same, but the way it is experienced changes completely. The mind no longer controls reality, awareness does. And in that awareness, there is peace, clarity, and a deep sense of inner freedom. Growth is not something that requires effort or struggle. It is a natural unfolding, much like a flower blooming or a river flowing toward the ocean. Yet the mind has been conditioned to believe that progress must be forced, that becoming better requires constant striving, pushing, and achieving. This belief creates a cycle of exhaustion, where growth feels like an endless task rather than an effortless process. But true growth does not come from forcing change. It comes from allowing what is already within to emerge. A tree does not struggle to grow. It does not resist the seasons or try to control how quickly its branches extend. It simply responds to its environment, taking in sunlight, water, and nutrients, allowing nature to guide its expansion. In the same way, personal growth happens not by struggling to become something different, but by removing the barriers that block what is already present. These barriers exist in the form of fears, doubts, and limiting beliefs, mental constructs that create resistance against the natural unfolding of life. The moment these barriers are released, growth happens effortlessly. The mind, however, is addicted to effort. It believes that unless something is difficult, it is not valuable. It associates progress with struggle, reinforcing the idea that success and self-improvement must be earned through hardship. But when effort is replaced with presence, everything shifts. The need to force outcomes disappears, replaced by a deep trust in the unfolding of life. Instead of chasing an idea of who one should become, there is an acceptance of who one already is. This acceptance does not mean stagnation. It means allowing growth to happen naturally, without resistance. Striving often comes from a place of lack, the belief that something is missing, that there is not enough, that one must achieve more to be complete. But there is nothing missing. Everything needed for growth already exists within, just as a seed contains within it the potential to become a great tree. Every person carries within them the potential for transformation. The process is not about adding anything new, but about creating the right conditions for growth to occur. When the mind becomes quiet, when resistance is released, and when presence replaces effort, expansion happens effortlessly. Growth is not a race. There is no timeline to follow, no destination to reach. The obsession with reaching a specific goal often blinds people to the growth that is already happening in each moment. Every experience, whether pleasant or challenging, is shaping and refining awareness. Even in moments of stillness, transformation is taking place. The mind may demand visible progress, but true change often happens quietly, beneath the surface, in ways that cannot be measured or controlled. When the need for immediate results is let go, patience arises, and with patience comes the ability to trust the process. When growth is seen as unfolding rather than striving, life becomes lighter. There is no longer the burden of trying to prove something, no longer the exhaustion of chasing an ideal self. Instead, there is an openness to experience, a willingness to learn, and a deep appreciation for the journey itself. Growth does not come from forcing oneself into change. It comes from aligning with the natural flow of life. It happens in the moments of awareness, in the quiet recognition of what is, in the acceptance of both light and shadow. When struggle is abandoned, what remains is a path of effortless expansion, where transformation is not something to achieve, but something to allow. The way you show up in the world does not just affect your own life, it influences the energy of those around you. Every thought, every emotion, every action carries a vibration that extends beyond yourself. The presence you cultivate within shapes the presence you bring to others. If you are filled with inner turmoil, that energy radiates outward, affecting the people you interact with. But when you embody stillness, awareness, and peace, you uplift not just yourself, but also the environment around you. There is no separation between personal growth and the impact it has on others. Many believe that transformation is an individual pursuit, something that happens in isolation. But as you evolve, you naturally elevate those in your presence. A single person grounded in awareness has the power to shift the energy of an entire room. When you operate from a state of clarity rather than reaction, those around you feel it. When you meet life with calmness rather than resistance, others sense that stability. Without saying a word, your very presence becomes a guide, a source of stillness in a world consumed by noise. The mind often seeks to change others, believing that if people behave differently, if circumstances were more favorable, peace would be easier to find. But external change is not where true transformation happens. The greatest influence comes not from trying to fix the world, but from embodying the change you wish to see. People do not shift because they are told to, they shift because they feel the presence of someone who has already stepped beyond struggle and into awareness. The energy of presence speaks louder than words, carrying a deeper message than any advice or instruction ever could. Relationships reflect the state of inner being. When you are caught in identification with thoughts and emotions, interactions become entangled with conflict, misunderstanding, and expectation. The mind seeks validation, control, or approval, creating unconscious patterns of attachment and resistance. But when awareness replaces identification, relationships take on a new quality. There is no longer a need to prove anything, no longer a sense of lack that must be filled by another. Instead of seeking, there is giving. Instead of reacting, there is understanding. Without effort, interactions become more harmonious, not because others have changed, but because you have. This shift extends beyond personal connections. The world is an accumulation of collective consciousness, shaped by the inner states of individuals. Fear and division arise when people operate from unconscious patterns, reacting instead of seeing clearly. But when even a small number of individuals embody awareness, the collective begins to shift. Presence spreads not through force, but through resonance. Just as a single candle can light an entire room, a single person deeply rooted in awareness can influence far beyond what is visible. The more people step into presence, the more that energy becomes available to the world. Growth is never just for oneself. Elevation is never just personal. When you cultivate awareness, you become a source of clarity for others. When you operate from peace, you offer peace to those who have forgotten it within themselves. The greatest contribution to the world is not found in effort or struggle, but in the deep embodiment of presence. What you are within shapes what you bring to every interaction, every space, every moment. Through your own elevation, you become a silent reminder to others of what is possible, of the stillness that has always been there, waiting to be remembered. True elevation is not about achieving more, becoming someone different, or striving for an ideal version of yourself. It is about shedding resistance, quieting the mind, and allowing growth to unfold naturally. It is about stepping beyond unconscious reactions into deep awareness, where clarity, peace, and presence guide every moment. When you release the struggle, life flows effortlessly. When you embrace stillness, wisdom arises. When you embody awareness, you uplift not only yourself, but the world around you. There is nothing to force, nothing to chase, only the realization that everything you seek has always been within you, waiting to be seen.